Randy, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about your Praxis success story. You are kind of a well-known name in the community. You really left a legacy for yourself. So I know this is a long-awaited story and interview for many. Maybe you can kick us off by just kind of sharing, like, what do you do today? And what's kind of the like aftermath of going through the Praxis experience and where you've landed on your feet.
Absolutely. I think the short answer to that is like I do anything anyone's willing to pay me for to some extent. I'm the founder of a marketing consulting company, so ideally I'd be doing a little bit of a different work than what I'm currently doing for my clients. I spend a lot of time, like, I was just talking to Mitchell Earl about this the other day. I was like, I spend so much time just like writing recap emails for my clients about like the meetings we've had and what I'm working on this week. And so basically I spend my days writing emails, but when I'm not writing emails, I'm doing tons of super fun things for my clients. Like I do some ghostwriting for newsletters and then lots of social media stuff. And then I also do just some advising around like marketing strategy as a whole. So that's kind of where I am. When I'm not doing all those fun things, I read a lot, and yeah, I live a pretty boring life, I'm not gonna lie.
But so now you've been able to transition into doing your own thing. Maybe let's backtrack a little bit. Before being able to transition into founding creatives and your marketing consultant agency, what were you doing before that? Because that was the offer that you landed through Praxis.
Yes, what was my actual title? Brand and strategy specialist, I think is what I was called at Vida. So they're they're a coaching company in general. They focus on leadership, life, career, and health coaching. So I worked with them for about 18 months, doing just about everything. I got hired there through my apprenticeship as a B2B kind of like sales representative. I did that for 5-ish months, and they moved me into customer success and support. And then I did that for about 4 to 5 more months roughly. And then I moved into this like fully marketing based role where I was doing brand strategy, running all the socials, running the blog, all of those great things. So I did that from about like the 9-10 month mark on the other 8 months until I stepped down there.
Super interesting. So you essentially like were in a utility player role stretched over time.
I was, yes. I was the like, if something's broken, go to Randy. And I was just supposed to like hold all the answers and the solutions to things. My favorite comeback was, let me Google it.
Well, that's a really useful skill. Like a lot of people need to know how to utilize Google to that level. So a year ago, like before you started at Ama La Vida, before you stepped into this role as a utility player, would you have seen yourself being able to step into and succeed in a role like that? Or was it that year-long process in Praxis that kind of like led up to you slowly gaining the skills and confidence to get there?
I don't know. I think I, in my head, probably could say yes. In like action and how that plays out, I don't know if I would have like been well enough equipped to actually like execute on that. I've always had a lot more confidence than I have skill, so saying I could do it was like never the problem for me. It was like actually being able to like do the thing. But like that said, I grew up, my dad ran a small business here in the town that I grew up in, and his like favorite saying was like, I just tell my clients yes and I figure it out later. And so that was like how I was raised. I would just like say yes and then be like, okay, so now I have a deadline and I'm gonna like figure out how to do this thing. And I would get it done, and Yeah, I just like made things work because that's maybe like who I am. I don't know that I'm happy about that character trait, but like I have it.
But it's like gotten you to where you are today, where you can take on like bigger clients because you're willing to trust yourself to figure it out at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely think I've had to learn like kind of a risk assessment around like, is it feasible for me to actually learn the thing they want me to do in X amount of time, or is that just not smart or wise? So I've had to like, I trust myself too well, I would probably say. So I've had to learn how to kind of balance the act of having the confidence that I can get it done and trusting that I'll be able to provide a quality of work that's high enough that they're, like the client's looking for. So it's kind of been a balancing act, but I definitely think going through Praxis is what helped me kind of learn how to balance it and be able to assess like how long it takes me to learn something, or kind of like what the process is to learning a new task, or kind of extending knowledge in a vein of something that I like kind of know about but don't know like the ins and outs of. So the boot camp, you dig into all of these different things through the units where you do like a whole unit on marketing and a whole unit on sales and a whole unit on customer success and support. And so learning all of the ins and outs of those roles with very tight deadlines helped me learn that skill and build that muscle to say like, I can absolutely learn how to run Twitter ads for you in 2 weeks. Like, game on, let's do it, versus saying like, I'm sure I could figure it out if you gave me enough time. Like, I don't have to answer fluffy answers anymore. I can give like hard deadlines and then report back on physical like data-based metrics to say like, this is what I did and how I did it.
Like the skill of rapid skill development.
Yes, that's the best way to put it.
Awesome. So let's kind of talk about the jump from like who you were and where you were before Praxis to today, like running your own business and, having success at a business partner. What were you doing before Praxis, and like what stage in your life were you in?
I mean, looking at it now, I was an absolute baby, and maybe I like still am. I just turned 20 this past week, so that's where I'm at now, which is why I still say I'm an absolute baby. But I first heard about Praxis when I was 15. I was homeschooled and was kind of starting to think about what I would do after high school. I was in 9th or 10th grade at the time. And just like starting to explore. I wasn't really like at the age where I was like touring colleges or anything. It was just kind of like pure curiosity on like what was out there and what options could possibly be a good fit for me at the time. So I had family friends go and see Isaac Morehouse speak at some random event locally, and they were like, oh my gosh, we think Randi would love this, you guys should like check it out. And so we got on the website and we checked it out, and we were like, oh, this actually seems like really cool, like I'm hype about this, which was not at all how I felt about college. I was like, I mean, I guess I'll go to college. Like, all people told me about college was that I would like have so much fun making new friends, and I was like, I'm going to college to make friends. That, I don't feel like that's why you go to college, but like, okay, maybe it is. Like, maybe I'm wrong. I wouldn't know. I've never been to college. So I was like totally unsure, like not amused with the idea of college, unsure about it. And so as I kept like learning more about Praxis, I was like, okay, so I had an intro call with, maybe it was Hannah Frankman or Isaac Morehouse. It was like one of them, and as soon as like I was asking questions, I was bought in. I was like, this is for me. This is what I'm gonna do with my life. Don't know what it means, but like here I am. This is it. And as parents should be, my mom was a little more skeptical and like asked a lot more questions, and then We were set up with a grad to kind of like talk through her program experience. And then once my mom had like heard a real testimonial and like asked questions from a real human being, was like, oh my gosh, no, absolutely. So I first applied to Praxis when I was just still in high school. I applied about a year out of like when I would have graduated. And they were super great about it. They're like, hey, you know, you're 15, you're still a little young. Like, our program's ideally like 18 to 24-year-olds. So we love you, but like not yet. And I was like, well, I mean, you're right. I guess I still am young. Okay, whatever. So I took it. I went away for a couple months, came back about 6 to 8 months later, had done, at the time, one of the pieces of feedback they'd given me was that it was hard to understand what kind of a worker I was because all I'd ever done was like babysit. So I went and I like got a job lifeguarding and then had like, you know, firmer hours and stricter policies and like had some other work experiences. I got a job at a local farmer's market doing like register and retail support, stuff like that. So I kind of went in and expanded, got an internship with a nonprofit here locally, did a lot of other fun things and was like, okay, now I feel like I'm ready. I've got a little bit more kind of like on the back burner in my experience toolbox and like, here goes. And I applied again and they were like, no, we still don't think you're ready. And I was like, okay, fine. And I just kind of like took it. And at that point I had also kind of like simultaneously decided that I was going to skip my 11th grade year of high school. I kind of sat down and looked at my credits and I was like, I only need one more credit to graduate, so like might as well just like tack it on this year and graduate instead of hanging around a whole nother year. So then it became like very real. I was like, I need to know what I'm doing next year because I'm graduating now. And so I had started applying to some local schools, not because I was super excited about going to them, but because they could be like good back pocket backup plans. Like if nothing else worked, I could go to college. Don't apply to college for that reason. Like just don't do it. You don't do it. I got some like really great financial aid packages and great scores on my SATs and all that stuff. So it was like, sure, I could do this. Don't do it. It feels way too comfortable. They almost got me. Like, don't do it, guys. So I had waited it'd probably been like 9 to 12 months since the last time I'd applied to Praxis, and I had, you know, 4 acceptance letters from local colleges with like great financial aid packages and stuff, but I wasn't, like, something felt really wrong. I wasn't excited and I didn't feel like any peace about the decision to go to college, so I decided to give Praxis one more shot, and third time's a charm. Maybe they knew that I would just like keep applying, or maybe they felt bad for me because it was my third time applying. Like, I don't know who decided to finally let me in, but they did, and I'm hoping they don't regret their decision. So I got in, and what I decided to do at the time, I was given the opportunity to take on a couple more hours at the pool I was lifeguarding at. I'd also like become a swim coach in between kind of like that time period. The internship at the nonprofit I was working for got extended, so I just kind of like took a little bit. I took like half of the gap year. It ended up to be like 6-ish months where I was just kind of like didn't really have plans. It was like going about life, working, kind of making money, spending money, because that was before I knew what to do with money, and just kind of like hanging out. You know, I was 17, living my life, doing whatever. And And then I started the boot camp in March of 2018, and it's crazy to think that that was just over 2 years ago. Wow. Yeah, that's all. Like, wow, that was just over 2 years ago.
Yeah, yeah, that is crazy. And time flies fast, like when all those changes start happening in your life and like the transformation process and all of that. So you got in the third time's a charm, like you said. And then you stepped into this program that's probably unlike anything you've ever gone through or experienced before. What was your first impression of stepping into the program? Like, was it the people that stood out to you, community, the curriculum? Like, what was it like when you just first got in there and you're like, I'm in, and now I have to do all this stuff?
Yes, it was a little bit overwhelming. I'll be completely honest. So I got on my every new class starts with like an opening seminar, and it's like I think it's 3 hours. It's like a 3-hour Zoom call where they kind of walk you through like the expectations during your boot camp. You kind of meet some of the advisors. They bring in some alumni that you can like ask questions to, all this great stuff. So I get on this call, super excited to meet the rest of my cohort. I'm literally the only girl and in my cohort. And I had like messaged Hannah Frankman, who is like the boot camp, I think her title's like community manager or something. But she basically like runs the boot camp. And she's like the go-to person for all amazing questions, and she answers them like a champ. And I was like, Hannah, I'm the only girl. And she was like, it's okay. You're just going to like show up and show out with all these guys. Like, you're going to be the top of your class. And I was like, I don't think so. So like my first impression was like, wow, I hope I meet another girl soon. But I did. I've met lots of amazing individuals in the Praxis community. But yeah, I think like once I got into the work, I was definitely overwhelmed at first. And then one of the first things they have you do is kind of like understand your daily and weekly and monthly kind of like schedules and the cadence of like how you're spending your time. And what looked like a lot of work for me at the start, I was like, hold up, like I actually waste so much time. This is totally reasonable and totally achievable. So the more I like dug into the curriculum, it was like, I think one of the things that I learned that has and probably will forever stick with me is like the maximizing your efficiency piece of Praxis. Like, work smarter, not harder, 110%, and then like go from there and just see what you can do. So that I think is less of a maybe like a hard skill that they teach you and more of like a soft skill that I've taken away from the program. But I mean, it's like drinking from a fire hydrant. That I think either of those work in that expression.
Fire hose.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's like drinking from a fire hose, but also you have like 700 life rafts around you. Like, every alum is like eager and excited to get to know you and help you. Every advisor is like on your side, in your corner, ready to like pep talk you or cheer you on or help you out. And it's a lot, but you're very well supported and you don't feel like you're kind of like on a desert island struggling your way through.
I love that. I love that. Did you have a really clear idea or expectation for what you wanted to get out of the program? Or were you one of those that kind of like jumped in and you're like, I'm just going to see where this takes me?
I knew. And that is probably part of like what made my personal experience like a little challenging at times, because I knew for a fact that I didn't really want to go into sales. It's like, I love talking to people and I have had done an internship in the marketing realm and was like, that is incredibly interesting to me. But I knew that I just like didn't want to be making cold calls, didn't want to be sending cold emails, like none of it. I did not want to interact with people that didn't want to interact with me. And as we're getting into placement, like, I mean, I did the sales project, it was fine. That was enough of like touching it from, you know, arms full extended, like, okay, like, cool, I know what happens here, but also like, I'm never going to do it. And as we were getting into placement, I was being matched with all of these companies for sales roles. And I very distinctly remember getting on a Zoom call with one of my advisors at the time who was running placement and like crying. I was like, I don't want to do sales. I only want to do marketing or customer success or like operations roles. Like, this is not what I want to do. You know that. And he's like, I know, Randi, I know. I just think you'd be really good at it if you gave yourself a shot. And I was like, no, I don't want to do it. And like, I was crying and it was just crazy. And he, at the time, had sent me earlier in that day another interview request for a company looking for sales role. And he was like, do the one that I already sent you today. And like, I promise I won't send you any more. And of course, that company was Vida. And as soon as I did the interview, I was like, I'm not going to say you're right because I'm not excited about the sales job, but like, I do love the company. So I kind of jumped in. I mean, I touched on this earlier. I did start in B2B sales. So I jumped in there and I kind of was unsure about the sales role, but we talked it over and we had decided that they were a company that was like growing fast enough that if I went in a sales position, I wouldn't be there for long. And thankfully that is very true. And I was only there for 4 or 5 months. And then I was like on to the next thing. But I think that was definitely something that I had to kind of come to terms with, is that like the advisors at Praxis, they don't know everything, but they know just a smidget more than you, especially about like how company culture works, how people and individuals like will fit into a company culture. Because I was 18. I had no idea what it meant to like be involved in a startup or work at a startup. And these advisors were trying to like honestly trying to be the most helpful people in the world to me and kind of point me to companies that I would be really good fits in based off of who I was as an individual, what I liked and valued in other people, and like who would potentially be my coworkers. And I was like, nope, I don't want it. And I like fought so hard against that process. So I think knowing what you want can be helpful, but it can also, it just kind of causes some other things that you need to like be aware of as to not make your life and the lives of your advisors like a million times harder, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Like, you know, me working with placement participants, you know, something I always tell them is like, you can have your guiding light, like your goal, and that's awesome because that helps like push you forward on your path. But you also don't know like the multitude of ways that you can get, you know, on that path and trajectory that you want to be on. So just remaining open is the best thing you can do.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the more I've learned about business, and now I run a business, and I'm continuing to understand more and more and more of it every single day that I'm doing what I do. All of it is like intertwined. Like there are kind of like subcategories of business that I would say are like the sales, the marketing, the operations, the customer success. But it's less of like pillars of business and more of like a Venn diagram where everything touches and there's only like little tiny bits on the outside that are like their own portions. Like the verbiage you use in marketing has to be similar to like the verbiage you use in a cold call, so that people can tell that like your brand is cohesive and you guys know what you're talking about. And like same with like the verbiage on your website needs to match like the verbiage in your contracts from an operational standpoint, so people feel like they're still working with the same company. Like all of that is related to your brand, which is related to like how customers see and perceive you and what they like, the feedback they give to your customer support team, and like all of those things. So it's less like business as a whole is like a knot of yarn than it is like a single string.
Right, right. Yeah, and that's a really great way to put it. And that's also why I'm just such a huge like proprietor and supporter of starting your career not only in sales, but like in a situation where you can be a utility player like you did, because you learn all those different pieces and you get like just enough from working in all those different areas.
Yeah, I think when you get to kind of jump around a company, you learn kind of like the framework, and then later in life you know enough that you can kind of go back and like fill it in. If you, apparently I really like analogies today, but if you think of like your career as a house, every time you're in a different kind of like a zone of business, whether that's, you know, sales or marketing or customer success or operations, like whatever that is, whatever you're doing, you're like framing out another room, and then it's there. It's probably functional. It might not be like as nice as it could be, but you have that space, you have those kind of skills. And then when you do end up like back in that arena for some other reason, whether it's because you open, you know, a marketing consulting company, like guess what? I now live in that marketing room, but I also am like learning more about sales every day and like decorating my sales room and like doing other things. And then, you know, at the end of your career, you have built this massive, gorgeous house that everybody comes to because it's fun to hang out at, and you have all the answers to the questions that people are asking you.
I love that. That's the best analogy of the call. Yeah, so let's talk about how you transitioned from Ama La Vida into now being your own business owner, like running your own thing, running a marketing consultant agency, because you had a great experience at Ama La Vida. Your team loved you. You were the go-to girl. What was that transition like, and how did it happen?
Definitely not overnight. I think people see kind of like big transitions, and I know I used to be like, oh, well, I could never just like leave a job that I love to go, you know, start a company, even if there's like, yes, tons of benefits, and like I would have more freedom over my schedule, and I could do X, Y, and Z, or I could potentially make X amount more money. Like there are a lot of pool reasons to go out and do your own thing, but there are also a lot of reasons that you don't want to do that. Like people like being comfortable. But for me, a lot of it revolved around like the work that I was doing. And when I had joined Ama La Vida, they were growing really quickly, and it was great. They have not stopped growing by any means. I think for a while we grew together at a really good pace, and then with like the pandemic and COVID and all of these things, like they continued growing, and I just kind of grew a little bit faster. So I was no longer really doing work that was new and exciting. I was doing the same thing every single day. I was, you know, onboarding new coaches and running the blog, and it was all becoming very monotonous, and none of it was boring per se, but nothing really like got me excited about going to work. It was like, okay, I'm gonna edit the same, you know, guest blogger drafts from these 5 people today, and then I'm gonna like get on Instagram and like do X, Y, and Z, and it was just not something that I was incredibly like, I wasn't continuing to learn. So to me, it was just like, cool. So I took a really long time to kind of make my transition. I had probably started thinking about it at the beginning of June, and I didn't actually leave until the beginning of August. So it took me about 2 months to come to terms with the fact that, like, even though they were starting to grow again after kind of like the first initial wave of COVID hit, it just wasn't going to be enough. And so as I was leaving, I knew that I wanted to be really probably overly cautious of how I left, being that it was like my first kind of professional job. So when I sat down and told the co-founders that I was going to be leaving, I had kind of proposed a few like 30-day exit plans, because I knew there were so many things that I needed to kind of like brain dump all of my knowledge on like the back end of our website into, and like clients that I had worked with and been supporting since they joined Amala Vida a year ago, that I like needed to kind of transition that role and responsibility off to. So I was really intentional about the way I positioned my departure, especially with like the timing piece. I didn't want them to feel like I was leaving them high and dry. So I gave them like 30-day options across the board, and all of those options kind of included like some variations around like if I would be 40 hours a week for the whole 30 days or if that would kind of drop off or whatever. And then we were able to kind of like custom build a plan off of those 3 frameworks that fit for them and made them feel, you know, supported and excited for me, to the point that like after I get off this call with you, like I'm having a virtual lunch with one of my old bosses because like we're still all really great friends, and we're still like here in each other's corner cheering each other on. So as I was leaving, I had kind of made a commitment to myself at the beginning of this process that I was going to leave really well, and I was going to leave with friends and coworkers who felt as excited for me as I was, instead of leaving them poorly and kind of like burning those bridges.
Yeah, that's a really great way to exit a job though. Like it's kind of just like exit the same way that you get started, like when you started a new job and you're like, this is what I want to accomplish in the first 30 days, but then you flip it and you're like, I'm exiting and like this is how I'm going to do it smoothly for you guys.
Yeah, I don't know that those are the words that I would have been able to string together so well, but that's what she said.
And so at that point, did you have a plan already for like what you were going to do business wise, or were you thinking about maybe applying to a new company?
I was pretty confident that I needed to be on my own for a little while. 2020 has been unideal for every human alive. 2020 took a little bit more of a negative turn for me a little bit sooner than everybody else. I had some big family stuff happen in February, and then with COVID hitting in March and just like the whole rest of the year being chaotic, I was like, I need absolute control over my schedule for the time being. I need to be able to like take mental health days when I need them and not be continuously worried about like either making those hours up or like did I use all my off days and stuff like that. So for me, I was like self-aware enough to know that like I needed that freedom in that space, but also that like I might find that at another company, but I also didn't want to like try my luck or be married to having to be at another company. So I just went off on my own. It was kind of good timing for me. I had some clients already that I had been working with kind of like on the weekends, just because I like doing marketing. So like, yeah, I'll do it on Saturdays. Like, I don't care. Like Sunday mornings, let's go. I'm not kidding. I have a really boring life. I just sit at home and do client work almost all the time. So like I had some clients that I was working with, and I knew that like I had X amount of income. I think the kind of like trigger point for me and what finally gave me the confidence in actually giving my notice and stepping down at Vida was that I was offered a part-time job from an old employer who I knew was going to be really flexible with me and going to kind of like give me that space and time as I needed it. So knowing that I would have kind of like a secured 20 hours a week that I could kind of like float throughout my week, and then having that client work that I could also rely on was kind of like the perfect balance for me to be able to say like, now is the time.
Yeah, and that's awesome. It really makes you feel just like very ready to make that transition and like to be able to rely on yourself. Well, that's awesome. So today you're still working on Creatives, which is the name of your marketing agency, right?
Yes, it is.
What are some of the most exciting projects or maybe client cases that you're working on currently with that?
All of it. I mean, there are some parts of it that I obviously like. I don't love accounting and like figuring all that crap out, but like there's something really empowering about not understanding how a system of business works and learning it and being now confident in my ability to like execute on that. And that's just kind of like where I am. Like everything's new, everything's unknown, but I'm like becoming more confident and empowered day by day as I am conquering these challenges and obstacles. So I just had an interesting call with a client a couple weeks ago, and they were like kind of unhappy with some things that I had delivered at the time, just because like our expectations of the project weren't super aligned. So he was expecting something totally different than like what I thought he was expecting, and like that's kind of where like the disconnect came in. But we were able to have a really great conversation about that, and I was able to kind of like come back from that. And since then, he's now extended my contract on to include a couple more things, because he knows that he can trust me and I'm going to like deliver the work that he's now looking for. So I think every time I kind of have one of those like, yes, I did it, like I'm still here another day, it's happening kind of moments, those are my favorite, and they come at this point like almost all day, every day, because everything's still very like unknown. But I'm sure there will come a day when they come a little less frequently.
No, but that's awesome, Randi. Okay, so I think the last question that I'll ask you is, what would you say is the biggest lesson or teaching that you got out of Praxis that has helped bring you to where you are today?
Oh man. I have such a hard time with this question, because there are a lot of things that I think, they just all to me like build on one another. And some of the concepts of things like, you know, maximizing your efficiency, and even just like being really good at emailing and responding to emails and how to communicate effectively are just things that I am continually blown away at, like how many people struggle with. That to me now comes so easily, because you spend a whole like week, 2 weeks on like where they drill all this stuff into you, and you're like, seriously, who needs to know how to use BCC? And I literally have one of my best professional friends tell me all the time how amazing I am, because I will like BCC her out of email chains when she connects me to people. And like it is seriously the smallest things that make you stand out like a really polished professional. So I don't know that it's like one particular skill that I learned in Praxis, but I think it's your guys' ability to take a really unrefined individual and kind of like super compact them into like the best version of a young professional that they can be and then like ship them out to the world.
That I think that's like the best way that you could put it. You answered the question really well.
Okay, great.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story and just talk about all the successes and the overall journey that you've been on over the last 2 years. It's been great chatting with you, and I hope we hear from you soon, and best of luck with creatives.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I loved this.